Hi, everyone. It's Dallas from Dallas. Yes, you heard that right. Dallas from Dallas. I am honored and excited to have Kathleen Leahy in the studio today to share her powerful journey through motherhood, medicine, and the moment that changed everything, leading her to a new perspective on health and the launch of Epiphany, a nonprofit that helps bring awareness to epilepsy. Let's dive in. Open hearts, endless motivation. This is Dallas Podcast. Thank you so much for being on today, Kathleen. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here.
I love the purple. You look beautiful in purple, by the way.
Thank you.
How did you come up with that color?
So purple actually is one of the colors that they use to represent epilepsy.
Oh.
So that's where it came from.
Hey,
it chose me. I didn't choose it, but I do love purple too. So thank you.
And it looks beautiful on you.
Thank you.
And it's a fun color to wear. Faith will love that. She'll be like one of your advertisers. She loves purple's her favorite color.
Yes, I love it.
So you hadn't met Faith when we met 8 years ago. We met 8 years ago, flying back from New York.
Yes.
Were you there for fun or?
I was there for work actually. I have to go back and look. I think I was actually doing extensive training in cardiology at the time. So I think that was the specialty I was working in. And I had just come back from some training from that. And we ended up being on the same flight.
Yes.
And I met Finley first, and she was just adorable and talkative, and I fell in love with her. And then I started talking to Max, and I was like, oh my gosh, here are these amazing children. And then I met you, and I was like, oh, I see where they came from, and it all makes sense.
You're so sweet.
So, yeah.
I remember that day. I remember us being at the carousel waiting on our luggage, and I knew you had talked to Finley, and you had talked to Max. And unfortunately, Faith was really young at the time, so she didn't get to go. But and she holds that over my head, by the way.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
She's counting down the days.
You guys had just had this amazing trip to New York City and seen all the things.
Oh, yeah.
And it was around Christmas.
It was.
Yeah.
And so she sees those pictures, and she's like, I'm going to New York on my 13th birthday. So she's got 3 years.
Okay.
But anyways, so I remember us sitting at the carousel waiting on our luggage, and you and I just completely kicked it off.
Yes.
And 8 years later, we're still friends, and we've, supported each other along the way. And it's been such an amazing friendship. It was like God ordained it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
For sure.
So I got to learn about Fearless Hope.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I was actually volunteering for an organization in Rockwall called Amica. Mm-hmm. And so that we got to bring you out. I got to introduce you to the ladies of Amica.
Yeah.
And kind of talk a little bit about Fearless Hope.
Yes.
And just kind of, it was just an opportunity for these two amazing nonprofit organizations to kind of come together and learn about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That was super special. I remember coming to your house and doing that. That was super sweet. And then, you have this, you were helping with the nonprofits in Rockwall. So you have some experience in obviously doing nonprofit work, which I know has helped you where you are now. But before we go into your new nonprofit, Epiphany, tell us a little bit about your medical history background.
Sure. So I've lived a lot of lives. I think it's been late 90s. I think in 1999, I started working in retail pharmacy, and I became a pharmacy technician, and then I worked hospital pharmacy, and I did that essentially to get myself through college. Got a lot of great background there, did a lot of medication management, cart fill. I even worked for a time when I was in Lubbock for a pharmacy that filled for the nursing homes. They would basically go and do the packets for the month of all the medications. So it was like a really great way for them to manage the patient's medications and just have them in these blister packs. And I was like, oh, this is phenomenal in terms of like organizing medications. And then I went on to become a respiratory therapist. So that was kind of my background, ICU, ER, spent a little bit of time in the NICU, things like that. And
that had to be hard. The NICU, was that hard?
For sure. But those babies were so resilient. And at the time I didn't have children.
Okay.
And also I worked at Children's for a little while in the cystic fibrosis floor.
Okay.
So I had, exposure to these kids.
Lot.
Yeah. I've lived a lot of lives, right? So I did that. And then I kind of started to go over into the sales side, medical sales. But in order to keep up my clinical skill set, I still did remote patient monitoring. So there was an incredible company that was very innovative at the time that hired me when I was very pregnant with my oldest son, Dane. And they were like, you've got a great background. We would love to have you come work here. And they were doing early kind of machine learning and AI before anybody talked about it like that, right?
Right.
And so a lot of it was like telemedicine, telecoaching, but there were no codes back then. There was no billable codes. So this wasn't something that was a big revenue source. But the company that I worked for had home healths throughout Texas and Louisiana. And then they also had patients, that were on this remote patient monitoring. So it was really unique to kind of see how medicine and technology could really help
coexist.
Patients 100%, keep them out of the hospital.
Right.
And so this company was innovative. And when Obamacare came out, they actually realized that they had something that they could also sell.
Right.
And so they started going to the hospitals and saying, hey, we can reduce your readmissions. We can help keep these patients, basically at home, which helped their revenue bottom line as well, because they couldn't bill for home health services if the patient wasn't at home.
Right.
So it had a lot of good caveats, but I just fell in love with the whole technology component at that time. And I thought, this is the future. This is how this is how you basically save medicine.
Yeah.
Because we don't have enough doctors and we don't have enough beds in the hospital and we don't have all of these things. And so I just really fell in love with the concept of that. So I did that. And then I started working for Baylor Institute for Rehabilitation. So I would go and assess brain and spinal cord injury patients and stroke patients, things like that. Orthopedics, trauma, basically you're alive, but now what do you do? Right. Like your life has changed.
Right.
And so that I definitely felt like I was doing God's work, but that was a very hard job because you're going and assessing the patients, you're providing that information to the physical medicine and rehabilitation doctors to try to get them approved to come in. And then you're fighting with insurance companies to make sure, from a documentation perspective. So that was a really great learning experience too. And then from there, I've done, I tell you, I've lived so many lives, but I ended up eventually going into a company called Frontera, and we would do on-site testing. So we would do cardiopulmonary testing, and we would basically go to bariatric offices and pair the bariatric surgeon with the cardiologist they would refer patients to and do testing on-site. For a lot of these patients, they couldn't go to a traditional office.
Yeah.
They couldn't fit necessarily into a chair. The equipment couldn't always accommodate them. And they were trying to take control of their health and their life.
But they couldn't because
they couldn't
get there.
A lot of times. And they were also high risk for surgery. And so we did basically a pre-surgical stratification to see what the risk for these patients were. If they had a cardiac issue, if they had a pulmonary issue, if they were just deconditioned. It gave anesthesia a better picture of how high risk is this patient. And it changed a lot of lives. It was amazing. And so I did that for a time. And then I eventually got into pharmaceutical sales. I was trying to be home more for my kids, right? So I always joke, sometimes God calls you on the phone. And I got a really interesting call one day when I was in Atlanta. I missed Gwen's first day of pre-K actually on my own, nobody else's fault. And I just thought, is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
And so out of the blue, this guy that I knew that ended up becoming my manager, wonderful man, Randy Sherberly, called me and said, hey, we have a position, at Johnson & Johnson if you're interested in interviewing. And I called my husband that day and I said, hey, I got this call. And he was apparently having a particularly hard day. I said, I got this call and it would be Dallas based. I wouldn't be traveling too much. And before I could spit anything else out about the position, because I was a national sales director of this other company, he goes, please take that job. We need you at home. We're having a bad day. I was like, okay, well, I'll see if I get it. Right.
Yeah.
So eventually it did work out. And so I went into cardiology. I was a cardiology specialist, anticoagulation specifically at that time. And learned a lot. So I got to specialize in something new, and that was exciting. And then later I went into infectious disease with them and learned a little bit more about HIV in particular. That was one of the main conditions that we treated. And then I eventually went into oncology and hematology. So multiple myeloma. I'm a hematologic specialist now for that particular role. So I had all this weird background leading up to, what eventually would help us form Epiphany.
There's no question that God knew what he was doing when he led you down these multiple decades of, different jobs, different roles, the experiences that you had with patients on both sides of the aisle, right? You've had so much experience. It's like God knew what he was doing and preparing you for what was going to happen in your life. And that moment in your life where everything probably just stopped.
Yep.
So can you bring us back to that day?
Yeah. So March 25th of 2023, our world completely changed. And leading up to that, we didn't have any indication. I had 3 beautiful, healthy children. And we were actually hurrying to a birthday party for my great niece that day, rushing like a mom does. My daughter had had a sleepover the night before. And one of the things that we know in terms of risk of seizure, and your seizure threshold is lack of sleep can often trigger a seizure. And so that day, Gwen had just opened up a can of sparkling water. And I was hurrying to get the gifts and everything ready, and I heard her drop the can. And she was right next to the sofa. She was there with her best friend, Blakely, who's been such an amazing child to, best friend and amazing child to deal with what she had to deal with that day too. And I said, oh my gosh, she dropped the can. So I ran to get a towel and was going to go back. And all of a sudden, Blakely and my oldest son, Dane, started saying, something's wrong with Gwen, something's wrong with Gwen. And thankfully, when this occurred, she fell onto the couch. So there was no trauma, nothing happened, but she began to have a seizure. And in my mind, we don't have seizures. I witnessed patients having seizures, throughout my career, but that happened to other people.
Yeah.
That didn't happen to us. We weren't sick. Like there was no reason for this to be occurring. And so in my mind, I thought, is she choking? Is she having a stroke? We were post-COVID. Everybody was talking about thrombosis. Yeah. I worked as an anticoagulation specialist. And my mind always goes, oh my gosh, there's a clot, like something's happening. And so my oldest son, Dane, remained calm. He called 911. My husband, myself, and Blakely were all there. And then my middle son, kind of came down in the middle of it. It ended up being about 3 minutes, but it was the longest 3 minutes of my life. And I was praying out loud over her as this was happening. Dane's on the phone. And I just, waiting for this to end, waiting for the paramedics to arrive. And so when the paramedics finally arrived, she was coming to, and she, started speaking and stuff. And in my mind, I'm like, please don't let her have brain damage. All the things.
Yeah.
And so
At what point did you know that it was a seizure? Because you're at the time you're thinking, I don't know exactly what's going on. You've got all this experience. Did that all come like as it was happening? Were you like,
it
I know.
It didn't. So I feel like I always tell people when it's my own kids, all my training goes out the window.
Right.
But I did know it was a seizure.
Okay.
But I thought, again, if she's choking and she has oxygen deprivation, it's causing the seizure. I was trying to find a causation immediately. I wanted to know, what is the etiology of this seizure that's happening right now? I knew it was a seizure, but why?
Why? Yeah.
And so my oldest son, in his infinite wisdom, and so Dane is I'm proud of all of my kids. Yes. They're amazing. Dane in particular, though, is just very astute. He is so if there's a detail, if you part your hair differently, he notices it. And so a couple months leading up to this, he had told us Gwen is having staring spells. And I think it's something that we should have looked at. And so I actually had marked it down. She had an upcoming appointment with the pediatrician. I had not seen it myself, but I had noted that I was going to ask that question because my 14-year-old was, again, paying close enough attention to say something's strange here. So he, on the phone with the 911 operator, said, I think that she's having, a seizure. And at the time, we didn't know how to pronounce the term, but she had, leading up to this, those were absence seizures that he was noticing, these very short bursts of staring spells that typically last about 10 seconds, when they initially manifest.
And is that a sign? That is a sign.
Okay. And so with her particular diagnosis, there's a range. So we've got childhood absence epilepsy, and then we have juvenile absence epilepsy. The prayer is always that if you have childhood absence epilepsy, it's relatively benign, and most children outgrow it. I think the figures are 80% will outgrow that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when you have what they now call tonic-clonic, used to be the term was grand mal that they used. When you have a tonic-clonic seizure, which is typically what you see in the movies, like the big, scary, eyes roll back, foaming, shaking in the whole body, that can typically be lifelong. And that's categorized as juvenile absence epilepsy. And so they kind of determine which way it's going, both from EEG and then clinical presentation.
Okay.
So her having this, and she was 9 years old at the time.
Okay.
She's kind of in a weird spot where they thought maybe this is atypical childhood absence epilepsy. That's the prayer. That's what we were really hoping for. But he was able to articulate this to the 911 operator at the time. He used the term absent. I think my sister's been having absent seizures because he looked it up on his own. Didn't tell us that part. Just said, hey, you should mention this pediatrician. So when we got to the emergency department, again, he told the emergency doctor that as well. And he actually had a photo. I think at the time his phone was out of storage, unfortunately. Yeah. But he actually had a photo from a day where he saw her eyes appeared funny. And so he went back and found that photo that he had taken.
Wow.
So, but when she did come to, when we're still back at the house, when, EMS and everybody had arrived, she was able to correctly answer questions, but it was like she was 2 years in the past. So we asked her who her teacher was, and it was like the teacher that she had in second grade, not in fourth grade, which was terrifying again for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, does she have memory?
Yeah.
Thankfully that all resolved. But yeah,
for that moment when she's answering questions and she's going back 2 years, is that a common thing?
I don't know. I haven't been able to, really research that enough or talk to anybody else enough that's been in that predicament. She never did that after that, with subsequent seizures, but that time she did. And that was terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is happening? It was accurate.
Yeah.
Just not right time.
Not right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be scary.
Yeah. It was really scary. So they call it the post-ictal state. And so essentially after you have a seizure, you go into what's known as a post-ictal state. So it takes a little bit of time to really kind of get your strength back, your wits about you, all of that.
Yeah.
And so they took her in the ambulance to Children's that day. And my hope was that they were going to do an EEG at the time, and they didn't. She'd resolved. Glucose levels look good. We kind of went through the whole gamma of, does she have a fever? Is there an infection? They did labs. Everything on that end looked good.
Why did they not do an EEG?
That's a great question, Dallas. And that's one of the things that I'm really adamant about changing.
Yeah.
So it was a Saturday. I don't know if they were busy. I don't know if they had a technician that was able to put the leads on for an EEG. I don't know if they actually had, an epileptologist or neurologist available that day. We never saw one when we were in the ER. And we were told essentially that it was probably benign, that it probably wouldn't happen again. And that's really not a fair thing to say to somebody because you don't know that.
No.
In a lot of instances, that's true. And we all hope that's true. But without more studies and without more education, we can't know that.
No.
And so that was a big source of frustration. And one of the things that I definitely wanted to share today too, there's a one of the foundations that I am hoping to promote is called the Mark Chaperon Foundation. And Mark was a little boy who actually passed away from SUDEP, which is sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. So he also went to the ER, and his first trip, he was told the same thing, that this is probably benign, probably won't happen again. It's probably no big deal. And unfortunately, just a very short time later, I want to say within 2 weeks, his mom went to wake him up and she could not wake him up. So, just tell somebody that this is fine and don't worry about it. So that particular day, I did at least have enough sense to say, well, we're not going to leave the emergency department without a rescue medication because what if it does happen again, right?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, now what? And their recommendation was that we follow up with neurology and, we can do an EEG later, but really at the point of care is when you want to get an EEG as soon as possible is ideal.
Yeah.
So if you're advocating for yourself, I tell everybody advocate for an EEG at the time.
Yes.
It's really important.
Yeah, because that makes sense to me. Just, again, just the mere fact that your brain just went through a trauma. Right. So let's see what's going on in your brain.
And I don't know that particular day, thankfully, nothing else. We saw no other evidence throughout the day, the next day, the day after of that. This occurred on a Saturday. Uh-huh. And so on Monday morning, I did call the pediatrician's office and I said, hey, I need you guys to order an EEG. We were able to get an appointment with a neurologist on Thursday, but I didn't want to have an appointment and just retell a story. I wanted to go in there with data.
Yeah.
And so our pediatrician was like, we don't typically order EEGs. And I was like, can you do it for me? And they did. And then it was getting her in, for a time slot. So I think on Tuesday, we were able to get her in for an EEG.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did it show anything at that point?
Well, this is what was interesting. My husband and I were both there and I had some work meetings that day. So I thought I would just go get her set up. And once I felt comfortable, I would leave and then he would take her, back for the rest of the day. And while we were there, they did a study where they use a pinwheel. And this is a hyperventilation test that they use. So I never will look at a pinwheel the same way.
Yeah.
But as she was doing that, if you were, in the room, my husband was sitting next to me. He didn't notice anything. I watched her eyes changed as she was doing the hyperventilation test. And I've heard from other parents that have children with the same diagnosis as Gwen. Their kids were in band and they were using an instrument and they could see it in videos later where, if you're not paying attention, you would never notice it.
Right.
No.
Because it's not like you having a grandma seizure where you're on the floor. It's
Correct.
Just it's your brain and it's your eyes.
It's just like a short glitch.
Yeah.
And for that short period of time, you do lose consciousness. So you could have lapses, from that.
Right.
So as soon as I saw that, I don't remember on that particular EEG how many there were, but I think I counted 5, like when they were doing that.
Wow.
And so my husband, and I'm not trying to scare her and I'm not trying to scare him. And he said, are you going to go to your meeting? And I was like, no. And he's like, why not? And I was like, I'm just going to stay.
Yeah.
So I'm texting everybody from work and I'm like, I'm not going to be there. But I knew at that moment that this was more, and this was not, just a one-off, unfortunately.
Yes. Okay. So you're now aware that this is, there's more to this story. This is not a one-off, where do you go from here?
Well, so we went Thursday and we actually saw a young neurologist. She was very nice. And she was not an epileptologist. So another thing I would advocate for everyone is you have to see an epileptologist if you have epilepsy. Now, the caveat to that is the system is very broken. There's not enough of them to go around. It can take sometimes 6 to 9 months to get in to see a true specialist. So we got in to see who we could, initially.
Yeah.
But she actually wasn't even capable of reading the EEG, although she understood it. So I'm not trying to talk trash. She understood it, but somebody else had to read and sign off on the EEG. So her interpretation came from them. And so they did see some 3 to 4 hertz spike waves, which would be indicative
of what you saw
of juvenile absence epilepsy. Yeah. So that was kind of like okay, we have something here. And so she immediately prescribed a medication. And unfortunately, that medication, in my opinion, exacerbated her symptoms. It didn't make them better. We went from, these short bursts. And again, this is up for debate. I'm not actually, a neurologist.
But you're a mom
But as a mom, I was like, this is not working. And even as we increased the dosage, they just got worse. And so those little things that we had never noticed before, now were becoming prolonged.
Yeah.
And you would see clusters of them. And then those clusters sometimes would turn into a very scary tonic-clonic again, which is where, it gets very dangerous.
So what do you do with that? I mean, the doctor's suggesting this one medication. You're seeing a decline in her ability to function at the same level as what she normally does.
Right.
So what do you do with that?
Pray. Look for the next specialist.
Yes.
Look for the next specialist.
Yes. And how long was she on, I guess, with that? Like, how long did you
Here's the other challenge with these type of medications. So even if you're on them for a very short duration, the wean time is much longer.
Okay.
So you and I, as individuals who don't typically have any type of seizures, even if we were put on these medications and weaned off of them, we could have seizures. So it's kind of hard to know, like, what is the actual condition versus what is, caused by these medications. So she wasn't on it that long. We actually, again, are so blessed. And this was my prayer in it. I was like, if you will just help get my daughter, free from seizures, I will use all my medical knowledge and everything I have in me to help others. But we had about 3 months basically of hell. And again, feeling like we were at war with an invisible enemy.
There is an invisible enemy that you are at war with.
It was bad. And so it took us about 3 months to get her off. So it wasn't just one medication. So instead of, saying, oh, this isn't really working, they kept her on that medication and then they added another and another and another. And I think before we got in to see the specialist that really, was the game changer and saved us, we were on about 5 medications and they were not helping.
Oh my goodness.
And the side effect profile of these, you wouldn't give to your worst enemy, let alone a child that you love.
Right. And I'm just curious. How would you even know what was causing if you're on one medication and it's not working, and then you keep her on that medication, and then you add another medication, and then you add another medication, you get to 5 medications, and you're still having problems.
Right.
Like, how do you even know which ones? Obviously the first medication was causing the problem,
Sure.
but then you've got all these other ones that you don't even know if they're working.
Right.
That's
and that's one of the challenges for, again, so many patients. I think the numbers are something like 33 to 55% of patients are refractory to epilepsy medications, meaning they will still have seizures even though they're taking these, medications, again, with large side effect profiles and things like that. And that's devastating. You're taking all this stuff and it's not really helping you. And again, in her case, she was getting much worse, not better. And so, I started researching and I tried early in this because, again, this was not my specialty.
Yeah.
And just talking to everybody that I could, let the experts be the experts. This is, your child. But I started researching. I couldn't stop. And that was, the all nights of like, okay, deep dives into white papers and clinical studies and what's out there. And I really felt in my heart of hearts that she was being medically mismanaged, that there was one drug that would work for her and it wasn't all of these other ones. And if we could just
find that one.
Get that one. But also I knew the work that had to be done to wean her off of all of these difficult medications. And so we'd seen, I think before we got in to see our amazing doc, he's a Cook Children's, Dr. Shahani. I think we'd seen 3 specialists at that point before we got in to see him. And I mean, it was starting to feel really hopeless. Like we were told she, was potentially refractory, intractable, might need brain surgery, but that also might not work for the particular type of epilepsy that she had. I mean, it was devastating.
So you're on these 5 medications. And did you say how long that was about?
So again, our timeline is really not that bad. It felt horrible for me, but all in, we had 3 months of this.
Well, that's a long time.
It felt like a long time, but I know parents that this is their reality every day for years and years and years.
But that's a long time to be on 5 medications and they're all like making it significantly worse. Right. So in that 3-month period, I know you mentioned you obviously didn't get a whole lot of sleep. But I mean, what was she doing in that time? Like, was she still having like seizures a lot?
She was. Okay. Yeah. And so we were having a significant number of the absence, which was affecting, like her memory and things like that, because she was losing whole periods of time when those were occurring. And instead of being, these short bursts of 10 seconds or not, some of them were prolonged and they would last like 2 minutes. And she would have them one after the other, after the other. And then, there were the tonic-clonics. So thankfully those were fewer and farther between, but they were occurring.
Yeah.
And so, terrified.
Like this can't work. I mean, you're like, this is not what it's meant to be. Like,
no,
this is
not our life. This is not what I want for my child.
No.
And so at that point, my health was also being impacted because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I lost a significant amount of weight. My mom was worried about both of us. She was like, I'm so worried about Gwen, but I'm really worried about you too. Like, I think you're going to have a heart attack. That was a very real worry because I felt like that too. And so she actually contacted my cousin in Chicago. And my cousin is actually a dentist in Chicago. And so she had previously taught at Loyola. And one of her patients was a pediatric epileptologist at one point. She also had taken care, I think she said she took care of her parents as well. So she'd known this family for many, many years.
Wow.
And so she called me and she said, hey, your mom is so worried about Gwen, but she's really worried about you too. And I said, yeah, I get it.
I understand why.
I'm worried. This is not going well.
Right.
Like, we need solutions here. And she said, well, I have a friend and she's going to call you. And she's a pediatric epileptologist. And I was like, okay, great. My hope and my frustration with everything, even with God, was just so high at that point. I was like, great. I hope she calls, because I knew how busy these people are.
And you're feeling a little hopeless because you've seen 3 different doctors. You've had all of these medications being prescribed. Nothing's working. It's getting worse. And now you're like putting it in God's hands to like, hopefully this lady will call. I mean, this is like a friend of a friend.
Sure.
Like,
exactly. Is she really going to call? In addition to my poor child, who's, again, she doesn't have any recollection of this. So she thinks we're all crazy.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm fine. We're all staring at her constantly. Like, are you okay? Are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. And I just wanted to keep her in bed. I wanted to keep her safe. Like I didn't,
in a bubble.
In a bubble. I did not want her going anywhere. I was just like, are you okay? Why don't you lay down? Like, let's watch a movie, and that's not fair to a 9-year-old. Like, she's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So, that same day after I had talked to my cousin Diane, I reached out to a friend of mine who was an ER physician. And I just thought, well, if anybody can, calm me down, this guy can, because they see stuff all the time, in the ER. And when I called him, we talked about it and he was like, oh my gosh, I'd be freaking out too. I'm like, not helping.
You're not helping me.
Not helping. He's like, well, I have something that might help. He said, I have a brother who is a pediatric epileptologist in Fort Worth. And I'm like, great, I'll go to his house. I'll sit on his, lawn right now. Let's camp out. And he said, well, he's out of the country right now, but I'll get you in touch and we'll try to get you in. And I was like, okay, all right, that sounds good. All right, we have somebody, somebody else. And he was such an amazing doctor. I thought, I'm sure if he's related to this person, he'll be amazing too. So that night, sure as my cousin Diane said, her friend Seema called me. And we visited and I was able to send her Gwen's record. And I did it just like I used to do basically the case studies for these inpatient rehab patients. I'd been building, these patient case studies like that. So I sent it to her and then I sent her the evidence of why I thought, she was being medically mismanaged. And she started laughing and she was like, okay, well, you've done your, you've done your homework. And she said two things to me that were so life-changing in that moment, because I kept looking for, who are the celebrities that have epilepsy?
Yeah.
Who can I show Gwen, like, it's going to be okay, and everything. And I couldn't find them. When I would research things would come up and it would be like rock stars that had, drug problems.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they were having seizures, but again, there's an etiology. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. Right. There was a cause.
Right.
And I couldn't find anything. And she said, I'm going to tell you two things that I need you to know. And then we're going to really dive into, all of her medical information. She said, your daughter's going to have a full life and we are going to get her seizure free.
Amen.
Amen. And then she said, two things she can't do. She cannot be a commercial pilot and she cannot be a long haul truck driver. I was like, okay. And she goes, anything else, she can still have the full life that you dreamed for her. Like, you just need to know that.
That was a gift from God.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I needed it in the worst way. And I always tell her that was the biggest gift that she could have ever given me.
Instilling hope. That's what a doctor's supposed to do. Like, ultimately, they should be instilling hope in every patient.
Yeah. So we talked about it and we went through, and she agreed with what I thought about the medication. And so she said, all right, well, we've got to wean all these guys down, and she said, so I'm going to tell you something though. She said, I have a guy that I mentored in Fort Worth.
No way.
And I knew it before she said it.
No way.
Swear. So
Confirmation.
I had just talked to his brother that, same day. And she said, and I said, is his name Dave Shahani? And she said, it is. And
wow.
I was like, okay, all right, we're on the right track.
You are on the path.
Definitely going to stalk him now. Yeah. Like, I'm going to his house, He needed to get back in the country. So unfortunately, it took us just a little bit of time to get in to see him.
Yeah.
But I think at that point we were like about 6 or 7 weeks into, all of this.
Yeah.
And so we got in to see him and he looked at all of what we'd been and he was like, this is a mess. And I was like, it is a mess. And he said, all right, so we've got to wean down. And we had to put together this schedule. And so I said, all right, just tell me what it looks like and I'll build the calendar out. And so I did. And when I took it, her prescriptions to the pharmacy, the pharmacist said, I don't know how to do this. And I said, I do. Yeah. Like, I've got it. And so they actually came in when we finally got Gwen seizure free. The whole staff came in and clapped and they thanked us. They were like, we've never had a parent. Cause I was a psycho, crazy person at that point.
Well, you were prepared though.
I was like, I've got this. Like, here's what the schedule is going to look like. Here's how we're going to do this. And it was still ugly for a little while because again, you're weaning off all of these medications that can also cause seizures. But we got her there. And at that point I was like, okay, this is my purpose now. So we have a pastor out in Rockwall, Josh Howerton, and one of his sayings that he always says that has stayed with me is our misery becomes our mission.
Yeah.
And I was living by that. I was like, all right, I have a new purpose now. And, what can I do? We need remote monitoring. We had cameras and stuff on her. I started researching everything that was available. And, I just made it my mission to find out as much as I could to try to help people in the same position.
So is she on any medication now?
She's on one medication. She takes it once a day.
Okay.
That was life-changing. Lots of people take medication once a day.
Yeah.
I used to have this fantasy, and there's still, the possibility and the hope that she won't need this forever, that she could be an atypical case, right? And she could technically outgrow this just because of the age of onset for her is unique, her being 9. But I don't really have that as much anymore. I still hope, obviously, that she doesn't need it. But taking medication once a day and knowing that it's going to protect her and give her this full life, I'm just like, it's not that big of a deal. And she doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Like she's, like, all right, I take medicine once a day. Lots of people take medicine once a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And, medication, there's a purpose.
For sure.
But, what you were dealing with was over medication.
Yes.
And
and wrong medication. It wasn't right for her diagnosis.
Right. And I think that's not to get on that wavelength, but I think that's a huge problem in a lot of areas.
Sure.
Is misdiagnosed of, whether it was epilepsy or whatever.
Right.
And they're prescribing these medications on top of medications, trying to treat using one medication and then saying, we'll put you on this one to treat the things that you're dealing with because of that medication and all the way down to like 5 that you were on. And ultimately none of them worked and none of them were right. So, it hurts my heart, because like you have the experience, you have the science background, you have been around it and you were able to really take that information and figure out a way, to get her seen by the right people and all of that. But like, there's a lot of people that don't have that background.
Yeah.
But I put a mom's heart and a mom's like tenacity and perseverance behind their child over pretty much anything else. I mean, I really do.
We will climb that mountain.
Yes.
Like, watch out.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Give it to a mom.
Yeah. Give it to a mom.
I always say that. Like, if you want something to get done and you think that there's no way, give it to a mom.
Yeah. That's going to go out to battle for their child, you know? And with that, with obviously prayer first, but they go hand in hand.
They do. Yep.
So, okay. So now Gwen is how many, 3 years?
So she celebrated 2.5 years seizure-free Christmas Day, actually, which was, every day we do not take it for granted.
Amen.
And every day when I think about other people that we hope to help, like that's my goal for them as well. Like it's such a gift. And there's, again, so many people that are not in the position that we're in. And even for us, it was difficult early on. We knew everybody. I mean, between my husband and I, my husband has worked in cardiac surgery and previously in neurosurgery. We knew people.
Right.
It didn't matter. It was still really, really hard to get into the right specialist.
Oh, absolutely.
What do people that don't have, these connections and a medical background do?
Right. I agree. And that's, I think that's why there's purpose behind, you're starting this nonprofit, Epiphany. I mean, it's about, you taking the information, the pains, you were saying your misery becomes your mission. I think it's your test becomes your testimony, right? Like here you are, you've been tested through all these different scenarios, these challenges that not only was she, had this grandma seizure, you didn't know what was going on. And then you're sitting in the office and you're watching her have these little small episodes. And then you take that information and you're like, okay, now I'm a person that has, witnessed these things, and I'm I'm an advocate for my child, but I want to be an advocate for so many people, and I'm going to take that information and spread it. Like I said earlier, it's like you came out of this fire with buckets of water to help other people, and that's not very common. So, so tell us about Epiphany. How'd you get the name?
So that was my husband. My husband's just good. And he is a very good writer, I feel like in general, but I was trying to think of a word that had epi in it that made sense.
Right.
And so when he said Epiphany, again, that's like this awakening, this knowledge, this spiritual awakening, or this, just increase in knowledge. And I was like, that's the word. So in order to get the website, it's actually EPI, so EPI, and then Epiphany, EPIPHANY.org.
Okay.
So that's our website now.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. I love I love the meaning behind it. I love the name. I love how you have the EPI in Epiphany, and just the double layers of it. It's beautiful. So I know obviously this is because of Gwyneth and the information that you guys have received, but are your kids involved? Your boys involved?
They are very, yes. So one of the projects that Dane is hoping to be published before he graduates from high school is the effects of epilepsy on the siblings. Okay. And we've, again, had so many people that have been brought into our lives that have just been amazing. So Dr. Mauro Caffarelli is on our board. He is actually working, he's out of UCSF. He's a pediatric neurointensivist, an incredible human. He's actually working on a platform where if children are having seizures, let's say they're on ECMO. So ECMO is, again, after you fail, typical ventilation, there's a lot of instances where they'll use it for other medical purposes. But in ECMO, a lot of times these pediatric patients will have strokes and they don't know that they're throwing these clots. So he has a new type of EEG software that actually goes over, the traditional EEG. So it's benefiting from AI. It's called a COIN platform. And so he has kind of come into our board, and he's been very instrumental in kind of encouraging Dane with,
that's awesome.
His studies. Dane is considering neuroscience as his major in college as a result of this. And same thing with Ryan. Like Ryan does a lot of video editing, and, he's going to help us with a lot of the media stuff on this. And then same thing with Gwen, just being a friend. You know, we felt so alone in this. It felt like, again, I knew patients that had seizures and stuff, but I didn't really know anybody else in our community that had it. And when you start talking to people, you find out they do, but it's 4,000 years of stigma, right? Where people are like, I don't want to talk about this. It's embarrassing. I don't want anybody to know. And that is the most isolating feeling in the world, because statistically speaking, there's a lot of conditions out there that have fewer patients that we know about. So I'll give you some numbers right now. Parkinson's disease has 1 million patients. Multiple sclerosis also has about 1 million patients. These are U.S. numbers. Autism spectrum disorders have about 2.7. Rheumatoid arthritis has 1.3. HIV and AIDS have 1.2. Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, has about 30,000 patients. And then all types of muscular dystrophy combined have 250,000 patients. What do you think the number for epilepsy in the United States is?
I'm going to guess that it's bigger.
It is. So 2.6 million have epilepsy. And yet we don't talk about it.
No.
So the other thing, again, that's so unique to me that I didn't know before. Is it because
people are embarrassed?
Typically.
Is it because they don't want to, because seizing is in their mind like any kind of disability is like embarrassing?
Yeah.
That's what it is, isn't it?
It is.
And that's so sad because it's like, it's not your fault,
So Brad Levy has Disney Day at Epilepsy.
Disney Day
at Epilepsy. His daughter, Sophie, actually had seizures and they ended up doing brain surgery and were able to correct her seizures. So she no longer does, but they started this amazing foundation to really educate other people and bring some of the best specialists in the whole country to this event that's really more patient focused.
Yeah.
So you've got the top experts there, but then you have all of these patients that, again, may be in a situation where they're being told they're refractory or intractable, or they've tried certain procedures, but their child is still suffering, from seizures. What else can we do? So it just kind of brings all of that amazing education together. He has been instrumental. He also had a group there that had like a lounge. And so the guy that started this has a PR company in Boston. And his name is escaping me right now. But I also talked to his wife, Rebecca. And so they have this lounge now. And across the wall, they have all of these amazing artists, celebrities, musicians that have epilepsy. So it was like one of the things I was looking for. And he was diagnosed, this founder of this lounge area, he was diagnosed in his teens, and his dad told him to never talk about it. Like, you do not speak about this. And there's a couple docs that actually attend this event too that are both neurologists. One is a pediatric epileptologist. The other one is an adult neurointensivist. They both have epilepsy. So they came and like talked to these kids and like poured life into them. And even in present day, and they do this,
Did you say they're doctors?
They're both physicians. One is a pediatric neurologist / epileptologist. The other one is a pediatric.
Does he perform surgery? No,
he doesn't. Okay. He just does general
that's still amazing.
Pediatric neurology.
That's
they're
amazing.
both amazing.
Yeah.
But they came and they talked to these kids and they actually just poured life into them. Like, hey, this is who we are now. And even they said sometimes they're still embarrassed to talk about it. Like if they have residents and stuff, sometimes they feel like telling their stories. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And you don't really want people looking at
But I see, I guess maybe because of what I've gone through with my daughter, I look at it as like, this is your story. This is your testimony. And it's beautiful. Like it's not to be ashamed of.
No, you don't have a choice in this.
I know you don't have a choice.
Gwen will tell us she's sorry sometimes. And I'm like, please don't ever say that to me. She's like, I'm sorry I ruined this. And I'm like, you didn't ruin anything. You didn't have a choice in any of this.
Right.
But having people like that. Right. And so that stigma, the 4,000-year stigma, Rebecca, the guy who started this lounge's wife, who again himself was an epileptic patient, like that's what happens. So like nobody talks about it. And so we really need those people. Like when you think about like Parkinson's, what Michael J. Fox has done for Parkinson's.
Yes.
Like we need these people to come out and say like, look how amazing I still am. This is, this is not my identity, but it is part of me.
Yes. And that's exactly right. I think that is such an important piece, is that nothing should, I tell, my kids, nothing is going to stop you from doing what God wants you to do. Nothing's impossible with God. So don't think for a second, because of what you have gone through, that's going to separate you from getting to do what you want to do and accomplish in your life.
Right.
So, I mean, for anybody, I mean, look at these doctors that have epilepsy and have become doctors. I mean, I think the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves.
We do. Well, and Patrick Brown, once a week, he actually has a thing where you can go into his calendar. And if you're just a young person, male, female, whatever, and you just want somebody that understands, that also has epilepsy to talk to, he's had this idea too. And I don't know if this will, happen, but he wants to have like a camp. Like
that's a great idea.
Like an actual camp. And some of those things exist. Like we have these medical community camps, but a lot of times people are walking around, you don't know they have epilepsy. They don't look like they have epilepsy. And so he said, like these two docs now. So I believe one is in Ohio and the other one's in North Carolina. So they met basically through this epilepsy day. But they were saying they even had friends growing up that later it was revealed to them that they had epilepsy, and they were like best friends and never talked about it.
Wow. They both had it.
They both had it. But it was just like, you don't talk about it. Like,
Yeah. I think that's it's from our generation, like back.
Agreed.
I don't think it's
there's
the
more
future.
now, right?
There's
the ability, more education.
Yeah, and I think there's a more, there's a lot of people out there that have different disabilities that are, doing amazing things or using their disability to, promote something or to share, their story. And like, there's no question in my mind that there is so much strength in numbers. So I think having, not that you have to wear that on your, on your forehead, but to, to just be open about it, because I think that you'll be able to relate in some sort of fashion, right? Like just because like, I don't have epilepsy, I've got something different that I've gone through, and we can relate and we can share our stories and see there's strength in those numbers, you know?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I was very protective of Gwen too. So even before this podcast, I asked her, is it okay if I share your story? And she's like, of course, Mom. Like, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
And same thing with friends, who've had seizures and stuff like that. Like, we've both talked to the school nurses where she's at. And like, if, something comes up and they need a resource, somebody to talk to, like we're here because we felt so alone.
Right.
So alone.
And that's the hard part, but that's the reason God placed Gwenny in your hands. And he's not surprised by any of this. And he definitely handpicked you guys to, have this daughter that she was going to go through it. Did you ever have any inclination that she had before the grandma seizure? Was there, besides what Dane saw, was there ever
the only other thing that ever happened when she had her vaccinations, I think she was around, I'm going to say between 18 and 24 months, however that schedule was, she did have a febrile seizure after vaccination. One off, that was it. But outside of that, no, there was no and again, we had an etiology that day, so that didn't frighten me as much.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's any correlation to that?
Well, I know now that there is.
Okay.
So, and this isn't to frighten people. So lots of people will have febrile seizures. Yeah. Okay. And most of those will be benign. You won't go on to have any kind of seizure or seizure disorder, anything like that. But almost everybody that does eventually have a seizure disorder and or epilepsy will have a history of febrile seizures. So there is a correlation there.
Okay. Yeah. I know there's a lot of talk right now about vaccinations and stuff like that. And, I know the state of Texas has, now lowered the amount of vaccinations. And so, I know there's more and more research coming out about that. And so I was curious if that could have, been tied to it. And I know that they do, that there are vaccinations and there's people that have those, seizures after and they're common, but it does make you question a little bit, what is exactly necessary for our kids and the future, because obviously we can't go back and change what, what's already been done, but moving forward, how do we, maybe cut some of that off so that it doesn't happen in the future.
Sure.
So obviously, you've gone through a lot with your family, and your family this is definitely a family affair. Your kids are involved, all of them, with, helping Epiphany, and they have even chosen professions possibly because of, what you guys went through.
Sure.
How is Gwyneth doing?
She's doing great. So she's 12 now. She's become a young woman. I have had to pull back a little bit on my concerns and monitoring and controls. And so early on in this, I told you guys about Gwen in March having her first seizure in March of 23. So I was a basket case, as you know already. And we did everything that we could in terms of available technology. So we had Apple Watches, we had cameras. I researched different things. I was actually working with, consulting with an AI company on some technology that they had. And they had these mattress pads that were supposed to be able to detect movement and things like that. They weren't yet approved in the United States. It was out of Israel. So we were kind of like a pilot for using that. And I was just doing everything I could to kind of give her a little bit of autonomy, but also be able to watch and be in control.
Yeah.
The same time that Gwen had her first seizure in March, another family friend of ours, their son had his seizure. And unfortunately in September, Jackson passed away. And so his mom, Tracy, is just absolutely beautiful. I did talk to her before the podcast to make sure it was okay. We talked about his legacy. She was so happy that we were going to be doing this. But he was an amazing young man. He was 16 years old. And they were actually trying to adjust medications. And so again, I talk about SUDEP, and this is something that should be talked at every visit when you're seeing your neurologist, if you initially have a seizure, if you go to the ER. And SUDEP stands for sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. And so it's a difficult conversation to have, but it's a necessary conversation to have, right? And again, the more monitoring that we can have for these patients, the Mark Sharon Foundation that I mentioned earlier in the show, Dr. Sharon, the young man, Mark's dad, he's an anesthesiologist. And he said when he does any type of procedure, regardless of how low risk it is, you still have to sign paperwork and you still have to inform people of the risks.
Right.
And a lot of times, despite the fact that they're supposed to have these conversations, it's uncomfortable to have them. And so it's very necessary, I feel like, to do that. But so from my perspective, I was using all this monitoring equipment and stuff. And when Gwen reached 2 years seizure free, my husband, her, and I had our visit with the neurologist, and, she said, "Mom," and it was like my husband and her both talking to me, "I would like to not have a camera in my room right now because I'm a young woman, and I still struggle with that. And if, things were to ever change, we would definitely go back to that particular strategy. But for all of us, this changed the marrow of our family.
Yeah,
so for, the boys, for Brad, Dane, Ryan, myself, we want to protect her in every way that we can. So we've pulled back on some of that now.
It's a fine line.
It's a very fine line. It does not make me comfortable. But I'm also trying to adjust to the fact that she is a young woman. This is her life.
Yeah.
And young women, they need privacy and all of that. I get it. Teens. So that, we've kind of pulled back on that some. But, when we have young men like Jackson and their stories need to be told.
Yes.
His life was cut short, and it breaks my heart for his mom every single day. But yeah, again, and then the stigma too, I remember, there was a lot of rumors about like how he passed, and there's just such a lack of education around epilepsy.
Oh, I can see how that would go down, spiral down the wrong.
So, but amazing young man, and his mom has tried to really raise awareness about SUDEP as well. So I'm hoping she's going to be helping me with some of the epiphany stuff too. I told her we're in this together, but yeah, it was a crazy situation. So his cousin, so his mom's niece, was actually my niece's roommate at Auburn too. So we just had all of these like family things. And again, poor Gwen, this is happening outside of, her little world, but I'm trying to put her back in the womb as a 9-year-old child, especially at this point, because I'm just like, I was already worried. Now I see something so close to home.
Jackson's legacy will live on, through Epiphany, through his family. And, that's the birth of, a lot of these nonprofits is people going through different circumstances that are very, very difficult, not having a place to call home in the sense of like a support system, right? Like what you went through, you felt like there was no one that you knew in your circle that you could reach out to and have a conversation with about what you were feeling and what was going on in your personal life with Gwyneth. And so that suffering, that had purpose, right? Like you are now, over 2 years removed, and yet you are taking all of that information, taking all of those experiences, and you're, created this Epiphany nonprofit to provide hope for other families that are walking in the same shoes that you walked through, and now you're up and moving, and you're helping people. And what are your goals for 2026? Where do you hope to be at the end of this year?
Oh gosh, we're ambitious, Dallas. We're very ambitious. But so some of what we talked about is I don't want people to feel alone. So my goal is to have a place where if you just need somebody to talk to, we want to create more of those support groups. I found a lot of great support online initially, and I actually got a lot of great information from these support groups. And again, I kind of modeled what I saw in oncology.
Yep.
And, just from a learning perspective, if you are diagnosed with anything, go look in the support groups. There's an amazing book that I read this year by David Fagabom. He was a physician that was diagnosed with a rare disease called Castleman's. And the name of his book is Chasing My Cure. And so he's actually using a lot of reverse AI. And one of the things that they found, for example, is folate deficiency. And a lot of these children that were like nonverbal with autism, that many of them could start speaking. There's a test called the FRAT test. FRAT stands for folate receptor antibody test. Used to be you'd have to actually do a spinal tap to tell there was a folate deficiency. And so they've got newer testing. It's not FDA approved yet. But what they did find is that this very old medication that, they've been using in chemotherapy patients for folate deficiency is working incredibly well for these children that have autism. And again, in particular, children that are nonverbal with autism.
Wow.
There's also a potential correlation there with some of these seizure type activity. So we noticed that a lot of children that have autism, their EEGs will actually appear like they're having seizures, even if outwardly they don't. So there seems to be some connection in the brain. Yeah, absolutely. But I've been so impressed with him and like his mission. So I want to raise awareness for every cure. That's one of the things that he's working on. And so they're looking at these old FDA approved therapies. So it could be stuff that's already sitting on your CVS or Walgreens shelf that could be used and applied to other, conditions, and often for very little cost.
Yeah.
Like that's, an amazing thing. So he's been a big inspiration. There is a doctor that actually kind of did a lot of the studies around that particular folate information. And so he wrote a book, it's called The Folate Fix. And so, just kind of looking back and forth at, these different types of things that could really be beneficial. We put a lot of folic acid into our breads and stuff, right? That's synthetic. If you have the MTHFR gene mutation, you can't actually process folic acid. It doesn't convert to folate like it should. And so there's again, an older medication. It's a folinic acid that they actually use. And so that's been really beneficial. So raising awareness is one of the things I also want to do. So we are working on some of our own tech, and we hope to maybe have some stuff by the end of 2026 with that. But in the meantime, I want to raise awareness of these other amazing, foundations, things like Every Cure, things like Disney Day at Epilepsy. That's, again, Brad Levy and Candy Levy's foundation with their daughter, Sophie. Just letting people know, like, hey, here's some really great resources on the Epilepsy Foundation site. Here's some technology that, exists right now that you could use that could really help you. There's also an organization called the Danny Did Foundation, and they will actually help parents if they don't have the financial resources for some of this great technology. There's a camera called the SAMI camera that a lot of people use that uses some of the motion detection and stuff. And it can alert you in the middle of the night, which is the fear of many parents with epilepsy is I don't want to go to sleep and have, my child have a seizure. Worse yet, my child have a suit up type scenario. And so they actually will award different types of technology to these parents, not just the SAMI camera, but they have a number of things. And so just raising awareness of like what's out there and then hopefully connecting people again, like I see in the oncology space so much too, just connecting them so that they can get that information. So we have a lot of ambitions. There's another site I would encourage anybody with any type of rare disease, especially if you're a parent of rare disease, called Citizen Health. And so Nasha Fitter has become a friend, and she's an incredible rare disease mom. So her daughter has a rare epilepsy called the FOX1G. So some of these are genetic, right? Sometimes we don't know why these patients have certain things, and sometimes we do. So in her daughter's situation, she's been fighting, and they've literally self-funded a potential treatment for these kids through the FOX1G Foundation. But she also started Citizen Health, which is an incredible site where it will combine your entire medical record. So from the time your child is, an infant and they go to the pediatrician to present day if they're older, and if they've been at multiple facilities, you can literally streamline, and it will normalize all of your medical records into one file.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because if you got these kids that are, have tons of, surgeries and doctor's appointments and all the things because they're, a special needs child, it's hard to keep up with all of that and to have it in one spot. That would be amazing.
So I actually last year I did a program through MIT on AI in healthcare. And this is like the type of innovation that they're looking for from the people in it, right? So it has an AI tool in it called AI Advocate. And AI Advocate will look at your entire medical history, right? So let's say you get an insurance denial for a particular type of medical equipment that you could benefit from. This will help you write and draft a letter based on your actual medical history, right? Same thing with like medications, IEPs for school. A lot of these children, need additional accommodations.
Yes.
I know with Finley, you understand how difficult this can be, but it can help you write, basically going into your meeting. It can also help you prepare for an upcoming appointment with a specialist. So it can use the notes from your last appointment and make recommendations on what you should bring up for this one, because it gets overwhelming. We're busy and we're trying to go into these things, and we want to make it, with the limited time that we get with these specialists, we want them to be very impactful. So it can help you basically put together, like, here's what you need to talk about. Here are things we need to look at. Again, pulling in your genetic profile, laboratory data, all of these things.
Well, and even just I'm just thinking out loud here, but I'm wondering if it could actually pull in, like, I know in the beginning with Finley, and I know with, those 3 months of like you watching her like a hawk.
Yeah.
All the notes that you probably took.
Yes.
And all the notes I took.
Yeah.
Just because I'm watching, and you're watching.
Yeah.
And so there's so much information that, you get into the office and you like forget like all the things that, you've just witnessed, and now you have it in one spot. I'm sure they could probably
100%.
download all of that.
Absolutely. And again, it normalizes it into one file, which is incredible. So if you end up, like often we never prepare to go to the emergency department, right? Like it's always, oh no, this is a surprise. You could have your whole medical record with you. So let's say you're traveling and it's like, in an emergency situation, it's hard to remember all the medications, all the history, everything. It's there now on this app.
Wow.
So anywhere you go, you have your medical history with you. And to me, that is so critical, especially with these, parents of rare disease kiddos. Yes. Like it's so necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, having it all in one spot, having it accessible, even through is it a QR code or?
Well, we hope, hopefully in the future, but right now you would just go to the Citizen Health site and you would be able to log in with that. But, eventually we want, potentially medical bracelets and things like that to be able to help if someone is found down from an EMS perspective, to be able to link to that. It's critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
To have this information.
Because time is necessary. Yes. Like it's the faster they can figure out what's going on, the faster they can help that patient.
And again, a lot of times, and I see this again in the world that I'm in oncology too, some of these newer drugs and newer therapies, if you go to the emergency department and they don't practice in that particular specialty, they don't know what they are. They don't really understand the side effect profile. So it's so
there's so many side effects too.
There's so many potential side effects or interactions, things that you can't use. And so it's so important that you have that available. And then you can say, wait, pause. Let me explain, what my child is taking. Let me explain my child's condition that and again, we can't fault people.
No.
These things are so rare sometimes, there may be less than 200 patients worldwide.
Right.
Everybody can't know.
Right.
And so, it's really, really helpful. And so I've been just amazed with her. She's another one of those moms that you're just like rooting for because she's out there fighting the fight and using her incredible technology and background to just change the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
Again, these stories are all connected, and again, different reasons for why you've met some of these people, but they're all pursuing the same thing to, help their child, but to help others that are dealing with, these special children that God's given us as, and
we were chosen. I had to keep telling myself that I was made for this.
Yes, I was made for
this. I was made for this.
Yes,
That was my mantra in the really dark times. Cause I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but you will do anything for your child.
Yes.
So,
and God loves them even more than we do. So it's really hard. I sometimes
we're borrowing them.
Yes, that's
we're
right.
We're borrowing them. But we have this obligation to treat them and care for them in the best way, right?
Yes. Like they're on loan to us, right?
Yes.
Like that's the way we should look at it.
Yes.
And, I think of, these children and, how they grow our faith, right?
Yes.
Like their experiences, the things that they go through just really, I think, helps grow our faith. And, they're very, very special, and these stories are special, and they're supposed to be told. And it's God doesn't like leave us; He continues to guide our steps. And one of the verses that came to me was Isaiah 58:11, and it's God will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry, restoring your strength like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing stream. And that is what you are, my friend. You are, I've watched this whole thing happen. You've been guided continually with him. He has given you strength when you needed it. He's made you like a well-watered garden and an ever-flowing stream. You are this beautiful light that you're sharing your experiences, you're sharing your heart, you're sharing the hope that is found in these situations, and you're proving every day that you can accomplish big things when God's behind it. So thank you so much for having the time with me here and your nonprofit Epiphany. We will definitely put your website in the episode description so that people can find you. Is there other ways that you would like to share how they can, reach out to you?
Yeah, so we're working on setting up some of our social media as well. So Facebook and Instagram should be live, I hope, this month.
Okay.
So we're working on that. And then I'll be happy within that to share any of the other nonprofits too, because again, the more education that we can do and the more resources we can give people, the better.
Absolutely. I would love that. Yeah. Yes, for definitely everything that you mentioned. I know people would love to have those links and be able to, look into it more. So
yes. And thank you. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for, putting this on and inviting me today. It means so much. I love you. I love your family.
I love you too. And who would have known 8 years ago that God would have had us sitting here today having this conversation? It was divine. It was purpose. And that's who God is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too.